The woman I was about to marry chose my brother's money over my love. 9 years later, at our father's funeral, she had the audacity to mock me for being poor. What she didn't know was that I'd spent those 9 years preparing for this exact moment. The rain hammered against the windows of St. Mary's Church as I adjusted my black tie for the third time. My hands weren't shaking from grief. Dad and I had made our peace before the stroke took him. No, this tremor was pure anticipation. After 9 years of careful planning, today would be the day everything changed. I deliberately arrived 15 minutes late, slipping into the back pew as Father Mackenzie droned through the opening prayers. The church was packed with Dad's business associates, distant relatives, and family friends who hadn't spoken to me since the scandal broke. Their whispered conversations died as the main doors opened with a theatrical flourish. Ethan strode in like he owned the place, which, technically, he did now. At 39, my older brother had maintained his quarterback physique and million-dollar smile. His custom-tailored Armani suit probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, but it wasn't Ethan that made my jaw clench. It was her. Celeste Rivas glided beside him, her arm linked through his like they were walking a red carpet instead of attending our father's funeral. She'd aged beautifully, the kind of expensive maintenance that Ethan's money could buy. Her black designer dress hugged her curves perfectly, and her diamond jewelry caught the church's dim lighting like tiny stars. She was my fiancée once, until she wasn't. The congregation turned to stare as they made their grand entrance. Ethan nodded solemnly at the mourners, playing the grieving eldest son to perfection. Celeste kept her eyes forward, but I caught the slight smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. They took their seats in the front row, the seats that should have been shared between both sons. I stayed in the back, watching, always watching. Father Mackenzie called for Ethan to deliver the eulogy. Of course he did. Ethan had donated enough money to renovate the church's bell tower last year. As my brother approached the podium, his voice boomed across the sanctuary. My father, Richard Hale, was a man of vision, Ethan began, his voice carrying that practiced politician's cadence. He built Hale Industries from nothing, creating jobs for hundreds of families in our community. As his eldest son, I've had the privilege of continuing his legacy, expanding the company's reach, and ensuring its future for generations to come. I bit my tongue. Dad had started the company, sure, but it was my forensic accounting work that had kept it profitable during the recession. Not that anyone would remember that now. Dad always said that family comes first, Ethan continued, his eyes finding mine across the crowded church. He believed in taking care of those who couldn't take care of themselves. That's why he made sure the company would be in capable hands after his passing. The dig was subtle but unmistakable. Poor little Leo, who couldn't even keep his own woman happy. Poor little Leo, who needed his big brother's charity to survive. After the service, we moved to Greenwood Cemetery for the burial. The rain had stopped, but the October air carried a bitter chill that cut through my wool coat. I stood at the edge of the gathering, close enough to hear but far enough to avoid the pitying glances. That's when Celeste made her move. She approached slowly, her heels clicking against the wet pavement. The mourners were focused on the graveside service, giving us a bubble of privacy. When she reached me, she leaned in close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume. The same scent she'd worn when she broke our engagement 9 years ago. Leo, she whispered, her breath warm against my ear. You look exactly the same. Same cheap suit, same defeated posture. She pulled back slightly, her dark eyes sparkling with malicious amusement. So, I guess I won, right? You're still poor, still invisible, still exactly where I left you. I turned to face her fully, my expression calm as a still pond. Hello, Celeste. You look well. Marriage to money suits you. She laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. Oh, it does. Ethan takes such good care of me. Did you know we just bought a house in the Hamptons? $20 million, cash. She tilted her head, studying my face for any reaction. But I suppose you wouldn't know about that kind of money, would you? No, I said quietly. I wouldn't. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed with you, she continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. We'd probably be living in some cramped apartment, worrying about rent money. You'd still be pushing papers around, making your little $30,000 a year, dreaming about a life you could never afford. I nodded thoughtfully. You're probably right. Her smile faltered slightly. She'd expected anger, hurt, some kind of emotional reaction she could feed on. My calm acceptance seemed to unsettle her. Don't you have anything to say? She pressed. No bitter words about how I broke your heart? No accusations about how I chose money over love? I glanced toward the graveside, where Ethan was accepting condolences with practiced grace. What would be the point? You made your choice. You got what you wanted. I did, she said, her confidence returning. I chose the winner. I chose the brother who could actually provide for a family, who could give me the life I deserved, and look how well it worked out. She gestured toward Ethan, who was now shaking hands with the mayor. He's everything you never could be, Leo. Successful, powerful, respected. When people see us together, they know they're looking at winners. I'm sure they do. My Aunt Mara appeared at my elbow, her weathered hand gently touching my arm. Leo, sweetheart, are you all right? Celeste's mask slipped back into place, transforming her into the picture of sympathetic concern. Oh, Mrs. Hale, I was just telling Leo how sorry I am for your loss. Richard was such a wonderful man. Aunt Mara's eyes were sharp despite her 72 years. She'd never liked Celeste, even during our engagement. Yes, he was. He always said that true character shows itself in difficult times. The comment hung in the air like a challenge. Celeste's smile became strained. Well, Celeste said, stepping back toward the main group, I should get back to Ethan. He needs me by his side during this difficult time. She looked at me one more time, her expression triumphant. Take care of yourself, Leo. Try not to get lost in the shadows. As she walked away, Aunt Mara squeezed my arm. That woman has poison in her veins, she muttered. I never understood what you saw in her. Neither do I said, watching Celeste rejoin Ethan. Not anymore. But that wasn't entirely true. I remembered exactly what I'd seen in her, the quick wit, the infectious laugh, the way she'd made me feel like I could conquer the world, before the money corrupted her, before Ethan showed her what real wealth looked like. The burial service concluded, and people began drifting toward their cars. I noticed Celeste lingering near the funeral home director, Mrs. Velasquez, having what appeared to be an intense conversation. Something about her body language seemed off, furtive, almost nervous. She kept glancing around as if checking whether anyone was watching. I was watching. After most of the mourners had left, I approached Mrs. Velasquez. She was a professional woman in her 50s who'd handled arrangements for half the prominent families in town. Mrs. Velasquez, thank you for everything today. The service was beautiful. She smiled warmly. Your father was a good man, Mr. Hale. I was honored to help. Her expression grew puzzled. Though I have to say, your brother's wife made some unusual requests. Oh? She wanted to spend some private time with the casket before we sealed it. Said she had a special memento to include. Mrs. Velasquez frowned. But when I checked later, it looked like something might have been removed instead of added. Interesting. What kind of something? Your father's gold watch. The one with the family inscription. I could have sworn I saw it during the final viewing, but... She shrugged. Perhaps I was mistaken. These events can be overwhelming. I thanked her and walked toward my car, my mind racing. Dad's watch was a family heirloom, passed down through 3 generations. It should have been buried with him according to his wishes. But if Celeste had taken it... My phone buzzed with a text from my old friend Darius, who ran a small cafe downtown. "Hey man, saw you at the funeral. Stop by when you get a chance. I have something you might want to see." 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a corner booth at Darius's place, nursing a cup of coffee and listening to my friend's story. "I never thought much about it at the time," Darius said, sliding a manila envelope across the table. "But after seeing them together today, it got me thinking about that night 9 years ago." I opened the envelope and found a photograph, grainy but clear enough. It showed Celeste entering the Hale Industries building at nearly midnight, 3 days before she broke our engagement. She was carrying an overnight bag and looking around nervously. "My cafe is right across the street," Darius explained. "I was doing inventory that night, working late. Saw her go in around 11:30. She didn't come out until almost dawn." "Did you see Ethan?" "His car was already there when she arrived. That fancy BMW of his was parked in his reserved spot." I studied the photograph, noting the timestamp. 11:47 p.m., 3 days before Celeste called off our wedding. 3 days before, she told me she needed time to think, and then immediately moved in with Ethan. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" Darius looked uncomfortable. "Honestly? I figured you already knew. I thought maybe you and Celeste were having problems, and she was getting advice from Ethan about the business side of your relationship. It wasn't until she married him 6 months later that I realized that she'd been cheating. Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I should have said something." I tucked the photograph back into the envelope. "It's ancient history now." But it wasn't. Nothing about this was ancient history. Every slight, every humiliation, every stolen moment of my life had been carefully catalogued and filed away. Today was just the beginning. The next morning, I drove to the old family house, the Victorian mansion where Ethan and I had grown up, where Dad had taught us to play chess in his study, where Mom had sung lullabies before cancer took her when I was 12. Ethan owned it now, of course. Everything had transferred to him as the responsible heir. I rang the doorbell like a visitor in my own childhood home. Ethan answered, still in his silk pajamas and Italian leather slippers. Behind him, I could hear Celeste's laughter echoing from the kitchen. "Leo, what do you want?" "I came to get Mom's jewelry box. Dad promised it to me years ago." Ethan leaned against the doorframe, blocking my entry. "I don't recall any such promise. Besides, Celeste has been using Mom's jewelry. It would be cruel to take it away from her now." "It's not about the jewelry. It's about the box itself. Mom carved my initials in the bottom when I was 8. "Prove it." We stared at each other for a long moment. He knew I was right. He'd been there when Mom did the carving. But possession was 9/10 of the law, and Ethan possessed everything now. "Look," he said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone he'd perfected over the years. "I know this is hard for you. Losing Dad, seeing how successful Celeste and I have become while you're still, well, struggling. But you need to accept reality. This house, the company, the family assets, they're mine now. Dad made his choice about who could handle the responsibility." Celeste appeared behind him, wearing one of Mom's vintage silk robes. She looked perfectly at home in my mother's house, wearing my mother's clothes. The sight made my stomach turn. "Leo!" she exclaimed with fake enthusiasm. "What brings you by so early?" "He wants Mom's jewelry box," Ethan explained. Celeste's hand flew to her throat, where Mom's pearl necklace rested against her skin. "Oh, but I love that box. It's so vintage and charming. Surely Leo wouldn't want to take away something that brings me such joy." She was good. I had to give her credit. The innocent act, the wide eyes, the subtle manipulation. She'd probably practiced that expression in the mirror. "Of course not," I said. "I wouldn't want to upset you." Ethan smiled, thinking he'd won another small victory. Good. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. As I turned to leave, Celeste called out, "Oh, Leo, I've been meaning to ask, are you still doing that little accounting job downtown? The one at that tiny firm nobody's ever heard of?" "I am. How sweet. It's so important to have hobbies." She giggled, the sound like nails on a chalkboard. "Ethan and I were just discussing our trip to Monaco next month. His business is expanding internationally, you know. He's negotiating a deal with some European investors. Very high-level stuff. Sounds impressive. It is. But I suppose not everyone can handle that kind of pressure. Some people are just meant for smaller things." I nodded and walked back to my car, but I didn't drive away immediately. Instead, I sat in the driveway and called my voicemail, pretending to check messages while actually recording the conversation I'd just had. Celeste's casual cruelty, Ethan's dismissive attitude, all of it captured on my phone. It was a small thing, but small things added up. That afternoon, I returned to the funeral home. Mrs. Velasquez was surprised to see me. "Mr. Hale, is everything all right? I wanted to thank you again for yesterday, and to ask about my father's watch. I've been thinking about what you said." Her expression grew uncomfortable. Perhaps I was mistaken. The stress of the day— "Mrs. Velasquez, my father specifically requested to be buried with that watch. If someone took it, that's theft. From a corpse. At a funeral." I let that sink in. "I'm not accusing anyone, but if you have any doubt about what you saw, maybe we should check the security footage." She hesitated. "We do have cameras in the viewing room, for insurance purposes. Could we look at the footage from yesterday, just to put my mind at ease?" 20 minutes later, we were watching grainy black and white video on her office computer. The timestamp showed 2:17 p.m., during the brief period when the viewing room had been cleared for final preparations. Celeste entered the frame, glancing around nervously. She approached the casket and leaned over Dad's body. Her hands moved quickly, and something glinted as she slipped it into her purse. "My God," Mrs. Velasquez whispered. "She actually took it. Can you make me a copy of this footage?" This is very serious, Mr. Hale. We should probably call the police." "Not yet. Let me handle this quietly first. Family matters should stay in the family when possible." She reluctantly burned the footage to a DVD, which I tucked safely into my jacket pocket. Another small piece of the puzzle. That evening, my phone rang. Celeste's name appeared on the caller ID. "Leo, darling, I hope I didn't upset you this morning. Sometimes I speak without thinking." I hit record on my phone app. "No upset at all." "Good, because I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I realize I might have sounded a bit harsh. The truth is, I sometimes feel guilty about how things ended between us." "Guilty?" "Well, not guilty exactly. More like sympathetic. You were so sweet, so innocent. You really believed that love was enough, didn't you? That we could live on your little salary and be happy in some tiny apartment. I did believe that. Oh, Leo." Her voice dripped with condescension. "That's what made you so endearing. And so naive. Do you know what Ethan gave me for our anniversary last month? A yacht. An actual yacht. 42 feet of pure luxury. We sailed to Martha's Vineyard and had dinner with senators. That sounds wonderful for you. It was, but the best part was knowing that I made the right choice. Can you imagine if I'd married you instead? I'd be clipping coupons and shopping at discount stores, worrying about whether we could afford to go out to dinner." "You're probably right." "I am right, and deep down, you know it too. That's why you're not angry with me. You understand that I did what I had to do. I chose the life I deserved." The call went on for another 10 minutes, with Celeste painting elaborate pictures of her luxurious lifestyle while subtly mocking my perceived poverty. Every word was recorded, saved, backed up to the cloud. When she finally hung up, I sat in my small apartment and smiled. Celeste thought she was twisting the knife, but she was actually handing me the weapon. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Hale, this is Aaron Karras from Hale Industries Accounting. Could we meet? I have information you need to hear." I stared at the message for a long moment. Aaron was Ethan's junior accountant, a quiet guy in his late 20s who'd always seemed nervous around the family. What could he possibly want to tell me? I texted back, "When and where?" "Tomorrow, 7 p.m., Riverside Park. Come alone." The plot was thickening. The next morning, I drove to Aunt Mara's house, a cozy cottage on the outskirts of town where she'd lived since Uncle Robert passed 5 years ago. Mara was Dad's younger sister, sharp as a tack despite her 72 years, and one of the few family members who'd never treated me like a charity case. She greeted me with homemade coffee and fresh-baked scones, settling into her favorite armchair with the kind of grace that comes from decades of practiced hospitality. "You look tired, sweetheart," she said, studying my face with those penetrating blue eyes. "Not sleeping well since the funeral?" "There's a lot on my mind." "I imagine there is. Seeing those two together again couldn't have been easy." I sipped my coffee, choosing my words carefully. "Aunt Mara, do you remember Dad's will? The original one, from before his stroke?" Her expression sharpened. "What do you mean?" "I've been thinking about some things Dad said over the years, about the company, about his plans for the future. Some of it doesn't match up with how everything was divided." Mara set down her teacup with a decisive clink. "Leo, there's something I've been wanting to tell you, but I wasn't sure if I should interfere. Your father came to see me about 6 months before his stroke. He was agitated, worried about Ethan's spending and some decisions he'd been making with the company." "What kind of decisions?" "Richard wouldn't give me details, but he mentioned changing his will. He said he'd been too focused on tradition, automatically assuming the oldest son should inherit everything. He wanted to reconsider, to look at which son had actually proven himself responsible." My heart started beating faster. "Did he say anything specific?" "He mentioned a document he'd drafted, something about giving you controlling interest in the company. He said you were the one with the real financial skills, that you'd been quietly keeping the business profitable while Ethan played the showman." "What happened to that document?" Mara stood up abruptly. "Wait here." She disappeared upstairs for several minutes, and I heard her moving around in what sounded like an attic. When she returned, she was carrying a dusty cardboard box. "After Robert died, I started keeping important family papers here. Your father asked me to store some documents for safekeeping. He said he didn't trust leaving everything at the house with Ethan having access." She opened the box and pulled out a manila folder marked Confidential RH. Inside was a draft will dated 18 months before Dad's death. As I read through it, my hands began to shake. According to this version, I was supposed to inherit 60% of Hale Industries, with Ethan receiving 30% and various charities getting the remainder. The family house would be sold, with proceeds split equally between Ethan and me. Most importantly, there was a clause stating that any heir found guilty of financial malfeasance would forfeit their inheritance entirely. "This is incredible," I whispered. "But why wasn't this the final version?" "That's what I've been wondering. Richard was planning to make it official, but then he had the stroke. Ethan took over his affairs immediately, said he was handling all the legal paperwork. The next thing I knew, the will that was read after the funeral gave everything to Ethan. I photographed every page of the draft will with my phone, then carefully returned the original to Aunt Mara for safekeeping." "There's something else," she said. "That woman, Celeste. I saw her at the house several times during your father's final weeks. She was very interested in his business papers, always asking Ethan questions about the company finances." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that made me think she was looking for something specific, or maybe making sure something stayed hidden." After leaving Aunt Mara's house, I drove downtown to the law office of Simone Kwan. Simone had been Dad's personal attorney for over a decade and one of my few allies in the legal community. Her practice specialized in corporate law and estate planning, and she had a reputation for being both brilliant and discreet. "Leo," she said, rising from behind her mahogany desk to give me a brief hug, "I'm so sorry about your father. I know how close you two were." "Thank you. Simone, I need your advice about something sensitive." I showed her the photographs of the draft will. She studied them carefully, her expression growing more serious with each page. "This is very interesting," she said finally, "and very different from the will that was probated. Is there any way to challenge the final will? To prove that Dad intended something different?" "Possibly, but it would require evidence that the final will was executed under duress, or that your father lacked mental capacity when he signed it, or that there was some kind of fraud involved." She looked at me intently. "Do you have reason to believe any of those things happened?" I told her about the conversation with Aunt Mara, about Celeste's suspicious behavior at the funeral home, about the photograph from Darius showing Celeste at Ethan's office before our breakup. "None of that is conclusive," Simone said. "But it's suggestive. If there was a pattern of manipulation or fraud..." She paused. "Leo, what exactly are you thinking?" "I think Ethan and Celeste have been planning this for years. I think they manipulated Dad when he was vulnerable, and I think they've been stealing from the company to fund their lifestyle." "Those are serious accusations. Do you have any proof of financial impropriety?" "Not yet, but I'm meeting with someone tonight who might." Simone leaned back in her chair. "Be very careful, Leo. If you're right about this, Ethan and Celeste have a lot to lose. People with a lot to lose can be dangerous." "I know, but I can't let them get away with it. Dad worked his whole life to build that company. He deserved to have his real wishes honored." She nodded slowly. "If you decide to move forward with this, you'll need ironclad evidence. Financial records, witness testimony, documentation of any fraud or manipulation, and you'll need to be prepared for a fight. Ethan won't give up easily." "I understand. Good. And Leo? Whatever you're planning, make sure it's legal. Don't let anger make you do something you'll regret." That evening I drove to Riverside Park as the sun was setting. Aaron Karras was waiting on a bench near the duck pond, looking nervous and glancing around constantly. He was a thin, pale man with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of anxious energy that came from carrying secrets. "Mr. Hale, thank you for coming." "Call me Leo. What did you want to tell me?" He pulled a manila envelope from his jacket. "I've been working in the accounting department for 3 years. Most of that time, I just did what I was told and didn't ask questions. But lately, some things haven't been adding up." "What kind of things?" "Money moving around in ways that don't make sense. Payments to shell companies that don't seem to exist. Expense reports for trips and purchases that seem excessive even for executive compensation." He handed me the envelope. "I made copies of some documents. I probably shouldn't have, but I think your brother and his wife have been stealing from the company." I opened the envelope and found bank statements, expense reports, and transfer records. Even with my forensic accounting background, it took me several minutes to piece together the pattern. But once I saw it, it was unmistakable. Over the past 3 years, nearly $2 million had been funneled out of Hale Industries through a series of shell companies and fake expense reports. The money had been used to purchase luxury items, fund expensive vacations, and buy real estate, all for Ethan and Celeste's personal use. "This is incredible," I said. "How long has this been going on?" "As far as I can tell, it started about 6 months after your father's stroke, when Ethan took over day-to-day operations." "Why are you showing me this? You could lose your job." Aaron's jaw tightened. "Because it's wrong, and because I think your father would have wanted you to know. He was always fair to the employees, always made sure we were treated well. Ethan isn't the same kind of man." I studied the documents more carefully. The shell companies were registered to various fake names, But one address kept appearing. A property in the Hamptons that I was willing to bet belonged to Ethan and Celeste. Aaron, would you be willing to testify about this if it came to a legal proceeding? He hesitated. I need to think about it. I have a family to support. I understand, but this evidence could be crucial. There's something else, he said quietly. I think there are more documents, older ones, that might show this pattern goes back even further. But they're in the company's archive room, and access is restricted. How restricted? Ethan has the only key, but... He glanced around nervously. There's a board meeting next week. If Ethan is in that meeting, the archive room would be unattended for a couple of hours. We talked for another 20 minutes, planning how I might gain access to those additional records. Aaron would create a distraction, giving me a window to search the archives. It was risky, but the potential payoff was enormous. As we prepared to leave, Aaron grabbed my arm. Mr. Hale, Leo, be careful. Your brother has been asking questions about you lately. About your finances, your living situation, whether you've been in contact with any lawyers. What kind of questions? The kind that make me think he's worried about something, like he knows you might be onto him. I drove home through the darkening streets, my mind racing. The pieces were starting to come together, but I needed more evidence before I could make any moves. Ethan and Celeste had spent years building their house of cards. Now, it was time to find the right place to apply pressure and watch it all come tumbling down. The Hale Industries building stood 23 stories tall in the heart of downtown, its glass and steel facade reflecting the morning sun like a beacon of corporate success. I'd spent countless hours in this building during my college internships and early career, back when Dad still hoped both his sons might work together to grow the family business. Those days felt like a lifetime ago. I entered through the main lobby, nodding to security guards who still remembered me. My visitor's badge felt foreign after years of absence, but I played the part of the grieving younger son settling estate affairs. Ethan's corner office on the 20th floor was a monument to excess. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, while his mahogany desk was large enough to land a small aircraft. Framed photos showed him shaking hands with politicians, accepting business awards, and posing with Celeste at various high society events. "Leo," he said, not bothering to stand when his secretary ushered me in. "What brings you by? I hope you're not here to ask for money." "Just trying to understand some of Dad's final business arrangements. There are a few loose ends with the estate paperwork." Ethan's expression sharpened slightly. "What kind of loose ends?" "Nothing major. Some discrepancies in the financial records that Simone needs clarified for tax purposes." I kept my voice casual, uninterested. She asked me to get copies of the company's recent quarterly reports. "I can have accounting send those over." Actually, she needs the detailed breakdowns, not just the summaries. Said something about expense categorizations for the IRS. I shrugged. You know how lawyers are about paperwork. Ethan hesitated, clearly weighing whether this was a reasonable request. Finally, he pressed his intercom button. "Send Aaron Kiris up here." 5 minutes later, Aaron appeared in the doorway, looking as nervous as ever. His eyes briefly met mine before focusing on Ethan. "Aaron, Leo needs access to our detailed quarterly reports for estate purposes. Take him down to the archive room and get him whatever Simone Kwan's office requires." "Yes, sir." As we walked toward the elevators, Aaron whispered, "The board meeting starts in an hour. That gives us maybe 90 minutes before anyone checks the archive room." The company's archive room was in the basement, a climate-controlled space filled with filing cabinets and document boxes dating back to the company's founding. Aaron unlocked the door with shaking hands. "The recent financial records are in Section C," he said, "but the older files, the ones from around the time of your father's stroke, are over here." He led me to a series of filing cabinets marked with dates from 3 years ago. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the pattern of theft. I think it might go back further than I originally thought. We worked quickly, photographing documents with our phones. What we found was even worse than I'd expected. The embezzlement hadn't started after Dad's stroke. It had been going on for over 4 years, carefully hidden through a sophisticated network of shell companies and falsified expense reports. But the most damning evidence was a series of emails between Ethan and Celeste, printed out and filed away like trophies. In them, they discussed their plans with startling clarity. From Celeste to Ethan, dated 2 weeks before my father's stroke. Richard is getting suspicious about the Cayman account. We need to accelerate the timeline. From Ethan to Celeste. Don't worry about the old man. His health isn't what it used to be. A little stress might solve our problems naturally. From Celeste. What about Leo? He's always been good with numbers. If he starts looking into the books? From Ethan. Leo won't be a problem. After the will is executed, he'll be too busy feeling sorry for himself to cause trouble. Besides, who would believe him? Poor little Leo, bitter about losing his inheritance. I felt sick reading those emails. They'd been planning this for years, waiting for Dad to die so they could complete their theft. The stroke had just accelerated their timeline. My God, Aaron whispered, looking over my shoulder. They actually put it in writing. Criminals always think they're smarter than they are, I said, continuing to photograph the evidence. They document everything because they're proud of their cleverness. We found more emails detailing how they'd manipulated Dad during his recovery from the stroke, convincing him to sign documents while he was medicated and confused. They'd even discussed bringing in a different lawyer to draft the final will, someone who wouldn't ask inconvenient questions about the changes from Dad's original intentions. In the deepest part of the filing cabinet, I found something that made my blood run cold. A copy of the original will that Aunt Mara had shown me, with a handwritten note from Ethan. Destroy never existed. But he hadn't destroyed it. He'd kept it, probably as some kind of insurance or trophy. Another example of criminal arrogance. We need to get out of here, Aaron said, glancing at his watch. The meeting should be ending soon. I photographed the last few documents and carefully returned everything to its original position. As we prepared to leave, Aaron grabbed my arm. Leo, there's something else. I think Celeste has been accessing the company's financial systems remotely. She has login credentials that Ethan created for her, supposedly so she could help with administrative tasks. What kind of administrative tasks? The kind that involve moving money around. I've seen her logged into the system late at night, making transfers that don't show up on the regular reports. We left the archive room and returned to the main floor. As the elevator doors opened, we nearly collided with Celeste herself, stepping out of the opposite elevator with a triumphant smile on her face. Leo, what a surprise. What brings you to our little corporate empire? Estate paperwork, I said calmly. Very boring stuff. Oh, I'm sure it is. Her eyes glittered with amusement. Though, I suppose any paperwork is exciting when you're not used to dealing with real money. She was wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, and her jewelry caught the lobby's lights like a constellation of stars. Everything about her screamed expensive, the kind of expensive that came from stolen money. Aaron, she said, turning to the nervous accountant, I need you to prepare a transfer authorization for the Monaco account. Ethan wants to move some funds before our trip next week. Yes, ma'am. Make sure it's processed tonight. We can't afford any delays with international banking. As she walked away, her heels clicking against the marble floor, I realized she'd just handed me another piece of evidence. A transfer to Monaco, timed with their vacation. More stolen money being moved offshore. That evening, I met with Simone in her office to review everything we'd discovered. She spread the photographs across her conference table, studying each document with the intensity of a detective examining crime scene evidence. This is extraordinary, she said finally. Not just the amount of money involved, but the premeditation. They documented their entire plan. Is it enough to challenge the will? It's enough to challenge a lot more than that. Leo, what we're looking at here isn't just inheritance fraud. It's corporate embezzlement on a massive scale. This could result in criminal charges. What's our next step? We need to be very careful about how we proceed. If Ethan and Celeste realize what we know, they could destroy evidence or move money offshore where we can't recover it. They're already moving money offshore. Celeste mentioned a transfer to Monaco tonight. Simone's expression darkened. Then we may be running out of time. I think we need to involve law enforcement sooner rather than later. Not yet, I said. I want to confront them first. Give them a chance to confess and make restitution. Leo, that's incredibly dangerous. If they're desperate, they won't see me as a threat. I'm just poor little Leo, remember? Harmless and defeated. I smiled grimly. Let them underestimate me one more time. Simone reluctantly agreed to hold off on involving the police, but only for a few more days. We scheduled a meeting for the following week to finalize our strategy. As I drove home through the city streets, I thought about the emails I'd read in the archive room. Ethan and Celeste had been so confident, so sure that they were untouchable. They'd stolen millions of dollars, manipulated a dying man, and destroyed a family legacy, all while laughing about how clever they were. But their arrogance was about to become their downfall. Every email, every document, every smug comment was another nail in their coffin. They'd spent years building their house of cards, never realizing that someone was quietly documenting every crime. The reckoning was coming. At Sterling Bank, the estate manager began reading Dad's will. Ethan got everything: house, controlling interest, and roughly $12 million, while I got a token $50,000. Ethan and Celeste sat there smug, their lawyer acting like the meeting was a coronation. Then the complication dropped. Simone Kwan had filed an inquiry on my behalf, and the bank was legally freezing all transfers until the will's validity and the finances around Dad's final months were reviewed. Ethan snapped at me, demanding what I was doing. I stayed calm and said the numbers didn't add up. That night at Simone's office, the case finally came into focus. Aaron traced nearly $4.3 million in embezzlement through shell payments and offshore accounts, ramping up after Dad's stroke. Simone showed the real bomb: forged signatures on key documents during Dad's recovery, confirmed by a handwriting expert, meaning the probated will wasn't just questionable, it was criminal. Worse, Aaron spotted accelerated offshore transfers and travel plans that looked like a getaway, maybe a week before they vanished into Monaco. Simone asked if I was ready to go to the DA and trigger arrests, media, and a public scandal. I didn't hesitate. After years of being treated like poor little Leo, I finally said the only thing that mattered: I'm ready. At Dad's memorial, Ethan played the perfect heir: grieving son, community leader, generous philanthropist, announcing a $5 million financial literacy foundation while subtly painting me as the family charity case. I let him finish, then asked one simple question: where would the money actually come from? When Ethan tried to brush me off, I pushed harder: international transfers, shell payments, creative expenses. The room went silent. Then I revealed the real reason I'd come: security footage from the funeral home. On the screen, Celeste slipped up to Dad's casket and stole his gold watch. Gasps rippled through the crowd. And before she could recover, Simone, a state attorney, stepped forward with federal agents and the results of a forensic investigation. Ethan and Celeste had embezzled $4.3 million through fake expenses and shell companies, and forged documents to manipulate Dad's will and steal my inheritance. The senior accountant backed it up. The FBI put them in cuffs right there. Celeste instantly turned on Ethan, screaming it was his plan. Guests fled, phones recording, reputations evaporating in real time. The agents told me the original will would be honored. Controlling interest in Hale Industries would go to me. As the room emptied and news vans rolled in, I felt calm. Ethan thought I was weak because I stayed quiet. He never understood that quiet was just patience, waiting for the perfect moment to end him with the truth.